Hello, welcome back to GIVEPAUSE Hobby. I am Kyle, and I'm here very excited because I am doing a reboot of the ROOTbot videos, the whole concept that got this channel started in the first place. So if you are here and you're thinking, I'm feeling deja vu, like haven't I been here roughly around this part of the internet and hearing something about the ROOTbots before? And the answer is yes. We have been here before. However, it's been about a year and a half since those very first video was this topic that we're talking about today, the Law of ROOTbotics, right here. And I feel like I've gotten a little bit better at filming, a little bit better at editing. I have a better handle on the subject matter. I've played a lot more games of Root. And for instance, there's this whole other series I do, Tea and Pancakes, one of these corners. I'm giving you a link to where you can go, where I just talk about my rankings of all the factions, all the maps, all the different data, the different variables you can put in over all my games of Root. Every 5 games I play, I'm talking about where my standings lie at that point. So I figured some things have changed. I actually have a different name for the whole channel, GIVEPAUSE Hobby, as opposed to just the Game Garage. I have a new camera, I've got a new setup, I'm using a green screen. No, I'm not in the woodland. And we have Clockwork 2 coming up, and I'm really excited for that. I am anxiously awaiting the official printed versions of the factions, the bot factions I've been playing for a while with the Better Bot project, but now with 100% more Kyle Farron art, which is never a bad thing. So anyways, I thought I would go back to the beginning and kind of start over, make adjustments to the things, the errors that I made, but also just put a little bit more cohesive and well put together product out there. So if you are rejoining me to learn about the ROOTbots, welcome back. Thanks for being here. If you are here for the first time, an extra big hello, and I can't wait for you to discover how wonderful this game of Root is as a solo game. It's obviously a great game when you have your other friends around the table. I think it's also an incredible experience when you're using the bots as well. The whole reason I'm doing this channel is that right there. So before I go on, another thing that I'm trying to get a little bit better at, if just hit the Klingon subtitles down below. If I say something wrong, if I make a mistake, if it's big enough, it's a big enough mistake, I'm probably going to make a whole new video, which is why these are episodes. This is episode 0. I'll make an episode 0. Whatever if there's a major issue that I need to address. Hopefully I don't have anything like that. If it's something small, like I misspeak or it's not as clear as it could be, the Klingon subtitles will get you the information you need. I will always also put information at the top of the description, but I know that in the fast-paced world we live in, we don't always read the description. So, you know, put the subtitles on and you're good to go. And as always, if you enjoy this content, this is a pretty magpie-ish channel. Of the whole idea of GIVEPAUSE Hobby is it's an opportunity for me to put time into projects that give me pause, but in a good way. Something I want to put some time into, whether it's music, whether it's Root, whether it's talking about games, whether it's whatever. So like the video, subscribe, all that stuff down below. But let's get to the actual meat and potatoes of today, the Law of ROOTbotics. So first of all, let's get it out of the way. I will not be covering in the original first ever video on this channel. I did Law of ROOTbotics and Mechanical Marquee. For right now, I'm separating the two. The Law of ROOTbotics is the overarching kind of rules that govern the use of the ROOTbots. So this is, again, well, episode 0, because it applies to everything that comes after it. There will obviously be the Mechanical Marquee coming up hot on its heels whenever I can get it out. But until then, you got this to start with, to whet your whistle. But before I get into the Law of ROOTbotics, I just wanted to quickly read from the Law of Root, because there's a couple of, from the FAQs, reading the law. on the back, a couple of questions that I think are really illustrative of how to go about, how I went about coming up with this video, how I encourage you to go about your whatever phase you're at in Root, how you go about reading the rules, summed up in these two questions. 1, I'd like to do something, and the rules don't say that I can't do it. Can I do it? And the answer, within the confines of the action, yes. The game will often surprise you with outlandish, unexpected situations, and that's part of the fun. But this doesn't mean you can flip the table. No table flipping. No matter how frustrating the situation is, don't do it. The other one, question 3, it seems like something should happen, but the rule doesn't tell me to do that thing. What do I do? Answer, follow the literal word of the law, not your instinct, even if a similar rule exists. So the Law of Root and the Law of ROOTbotics are incredibly detailed. They are specific in their wording. They do not generalize. So take it absolutely literally, and you should be good to go. So with that, let's get into it. Setup. So setup is going to be a little bit different with the bots. First and foremost, you have your priority markers. These are little hexagons numbered 1 through 12, and they're going to go on the 12 clearings of the map. What you're going to want to do is go into the Law of ROOTbotics, and there will be diagrams here, depending on which map you're using, to put those down on the map, because you are going to be referencing those all the time. It's a central feature of how we program, or how they programmed the bots. So very important. Next, choose factions using the faction combinations on the back of the rule books, or the reach values, or just choose whatever you want to do. Now, with the forthcoming ad set, the advanced setup, I don't know. I don't have eyes on a new part of the setup in the Law of ROOTbotics. I was told that there weren't going to be major changes. So I'm imagining that the robots, the ROOTbots, will still set up in the way that's described in the Law of ROOTbotics. There will not be rules for how you set up with advanced setup for the marquee or for the Erie or whatever it may be. So follow the actual setup, but in terms of the game composition, it's up to you, and if there are any other players playing, of course. Next, choose difficulty and traits. So the difficulty of the bots take 2 different forms, and it depends on which versions or what bots you're using. For the original Clockwork factions, this takes the form of cards. So the board itself is neutral. That is the standard or normal or whatever difficulty setting. And if you want to either dial it down to easy, or up to challenging or nightmare, there are cards that will, for easy and challenging, there will be some sort of gameplay change in terms of how many warriors it puts down, or how it approaches battles, or whatever it may be, that makes it either less or more difficult than the standard board. The nightmare difficulty takes whatever challenging was and just says +1 victory point every turn. Now, I've heard from Benjamin Schmaus, the source of the Better Bot project, which then became the source of the Clockwork expansion, or like the skeleton that built it upon, that the original Clockwork expansion dialed back some of the difficulty in order to make them a little bit more approachable. So the standard board is not necessarily a standard opponent. What Benjamin recommended was, if you're using the original Clockwork boards, to add +1 victory point a turn, because when you kind of extrapolate all the actual actions and effects from the bot's turns, it would roughly equal out to be 1 extra victory point a turn. So if you want to have a little bit more parity with the bots, you can just add that. Otherwise, the easy, the challenging, and the nightmare cards are there as well. Now, if you're using the Better Bot project files, or I'm told that the Clockwork 2 expansion is going to be this way, it will be an actual a variable that takes the place of something on the board of the bot. So it won't be a card that changes a rule. It will be some sort of depending on your difficulty level, you will put down 3 warriors or 4 or 5, something like that. And then there may sometimes also be the extra victory point each turn. So that's difficulty. And to me, how I imagine that is going to be how familiar a player is with Root. When you are creating, and I'm always in my headcanon coming up with these personalities that I make with the ROOTbots, when you're creating these players around a table from the bots, the difficulty is how challenging of an opponent they are. The trait is kind of your opportunity to give them a more personalized stamp of what type of player they are. Some of us can think of friends who are really aggressive, some who are really political and backstabby or whatever it may be. And the different traits in the original Clockwork factions have 4 different that, again, change a rule or add an additional rule to how the faction works. Now, there's no real specified amount of those that you put in. It's just sort of left up to you as the player. I recommend almost always putting in 1 trait. You can go up to having 4, but in generally speaking, each trait adds a little bit more difficulty to the bot. So if you were to add 1 as opposed to 0, the bot is a little bit more challenging. 2 more so, 3 even more, and 4 is like a pretty challenging opponent, even if you're on the normal, just like bare bones player board. So it's totally up to you. You can randomize it, you can choose it. Have fun coming up with your robot opponent. Kyle from the future. I forgot to talk about dominance cards. I referenced them later on, but I realized I didn't actually talk about the setup rule for when you're using the bots. So setup 3.4, or paragraph 3.4. It is a change to paragraph 3.1.3, the setup from the Law of Root. It says, modify the standard setup as follows. If you're playing with 1 or 2 humans, remove all 4 dominance cards from the deck. Shuffle the deck, each human draws 3 cards. So before, it just said, if you are playing with 2 players, remove all 4 dominance cards, shuffle the deck, each player draws 3. And it's just a little teeny thing. It doesn't have a reference to dominance. It's just part of the drawing your starting hand, and it's embedded in that rule. This is a change. For the same reason you can't have a dominance victory in a 2-player game, you can't have a dominance victory in a game where it's either just you versus the ROOTbots or you and 1 other human in a game with the ROOTbots. And that's because in a 2-player game, the way dominance works, it just can kind of bork the system a little bit, because it's just too easy to get into a situation where 1 other player will not have the ability to oust someone based on things outside of their control. And that's not made any easier if the player count is raised because of having ROOTbots included. The ROOTbots are not programmed to respond to anything aside from their implacable march towards 30 points. I just recently played the Oath solo mode with the Clockwork Prince, and that is a lot more kind of, it's the Clockwork Prince's mind responds to different threats. You actually go to different portions of the page and then follow prompts in that region based on the perceived threat. The only perceived threat that the ROOTbots are programmed with is just someone beating them to 30 points. So obviously, if you're in a game with just the ROOTbots, the dominance cards would be a completely busted strategy because they'd have no idea what you were doing. You would just sit there going, don't you see I'm going to lose, or I'm going to win and you're going to lose? And their answer would be, no, I do not at all. So if you are playing with 1 or 2 humans, you remove the dominance cards, because otherwise you are not playing a very fair game for our cardboard brethren. So that's the setup for the bots. And I think even though that's presented 3rd in the order, right there, setup for the bots, I think it's most important to go over that because it gives you kind of more of a concrete idea of how it looks different, how it feels different on the board. And then I actually go in reverse. I'm going to go to new rules first and then to changes to the law. So because I think the new rules again, the setup informs how the bot is going to be moving around, how it's physically going to be different. The new rules sort of train your mind how to think about how the bot would handle certain things that you never had to worry about for a player. And then that makes the changes to the law make a little bit more sense, because there are times when it references the new rules in the changes. So to me, no shade against Leader Games, but I am going 3, 2, 1 in the Law of ROOTbotics. So number 2, new rules. All right, so first up in the new rules, and again, no shade towards Leader Games, they are masters of their craft. However, I'm going to pull up from paragraph 2.7 and put it right to the top. Order cards. This is a crucial rule that is referenced a number of times in this section, and then also a number of times in the changes to the law. If you don't know what an ordered card is, we're going to fix that. So an ordered card, on its turn, a bot is going to draw a card from the common deck, and this is called their ordered card, to determine some actions that it makes. There will always be something that will, in there, whether it's in birdsong, daylight, or evening, that will say to take an action in an ordered clearing, which means matching the suit of the ordered card. So that's kind of like baseline understanding for the bots. If you don't understand ordered cards, a lot of the rest is going to be confusing. So with that, we'll go into clearing priority. So clearing target priority is the chapter 2.1, and is a massively important part of how the ROOTbots work. So we talked about the priority tokens and how you know exactly how they're going to be placed on the map, depending on what map you're playing. And number 1 is the highest priority. Number 12 is the lowest. So obviously the numeric value is the opposite. We're not talking about, we're talking about ordinal, first as opposed to 12th, not 1 as opposed to 12. Slight difference there. So first, number 1, highest priority. Number 12, lowest. Many times there are going to be multiple clearings that the bot's rules will tell you to target that will qualify it based on certain qualifiers as a target. If that happens and they have these otherwise tied clearings, the clearing priority always breaks ties. Now there will be times with some of the factions where they will tell you to go in lowest priority order. They'll give you a tiebreaker, and that will be true in lots of instances on the boards. They'll say a battle in an ordered clearing with the highest number of warriors, and then it says clearing ties, and it'll give you certain things, and I'll go over that with each faction. And sometimes it will say like the final tiebreaker in that list is priority, but it'll say lowest order. So in my mind, my headcanon, that's the factions being sneaky. They're not going for the big guts and glory play. They're going for the clearing that people aren't really going to notice. To me, that's how lowest priority works. So faction target priority is the next paragraph. So if a bot needs to target a faction, it's going to follow all the rules that it may have for whatever action it's completed. If that, however, doesn't really narrow it down, if it says, to attack the player with the highest victory point total, but there are 2 that are tied for 20 victory points, that's in the lead, then it will target the faction with the highest setup. Now, if you don't know what that means, the highest setup is, in the Law of Root, the order that they appear in the rule book is their setup order. Now, on the reason I say if you don't know what that means, on the player boards, those are on the back. It's like the A, B, C, D for the player factions. It is nowhere to be found on the actual ROOTbot boards. The back is just a fancy picture. So the order for you here listening: Cats, Birds, Alliance, Vagabond, Second Vagabond. I guess if you have both, maybe flip a coin between the 2 of them. Lizards, Otters, Moles, and Corvids. Obviously, this doesn't include the 2 new factions with the Marauder expansion. And Cole Worley has spoken multiple times about how the faction setup is part of the rigid rule structure of Root that the advanced setup kind of totally shakes up and makes different. Now, in terms of this part of it, if you're not using ad set, I would imagine that the badgers and rats would just bolt on to the end after the corvids. I don't know that for a fact. Down the road, check the Klingon subtitles and I'll have something in here. All right, so next up, target legality. If a bot's action can't be taken, if the way the rules are written means there's not a clearing that it can actually fulfill the action it needs, then it will expand its scope until either one of two things have happened. It has either taken the action in a clearing or it has attempted in all clearings possible. So what that means is the bot is going to first try strictly by the rules to take the action that's given to them. So if it says battle in an ordered clearing with the highest number of warriors, if that clearing, that say has 5 warriors of each of a different faction, has no warriors that the ROOTbot owns, obviously it can't participate in that battle. It can't start one because there's no warriors there. However, that doesn't mean that action just doesn't happen. It will then scroll down and it will try finding the next highest number of warriors. And if it has warriors in that clearing, the action will take place. Now, if there are 4 warriors of 2 different factions, and again, not including the ROOTbot in question, then that will just continue until it has either taken the action or it's attempted in all of the clearings that it possibly could. So this is a way where the bot's kind of strict rules on its faction board are giving you the ideal, where they'd like to take the action, whether that's bringing battle to the biggest war zone they can find, whether it's finding the most barren clearing to build a building, whatever it may be. That's the ideal version. But the target legality paragraph, allows that to be a little bit flexible so it doesn't just break when there's not that exact thing available to the ROOTbots. All right, next up, action order. So if multiple targets exist within a single action, for instance, to battle in all ordered clearings, you'll take those actions in descending priority. So again, starting with 1, then 2, 3, all the way down to 12. And if you're ever assessing priority for moving, to say move 1 warrior from each ordered clearing to an adjacent blah, 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 you will assess the origins priority, not the destination. It's a small little rule, but it will definitely come up. The next rule is strictly a terminology clarification, and that's such a. Now, what such a does is it really makes the boards, the ROOTbot player boards, possible. Otherwise, there would be way too much text, and there's no way they'd be able to fit it into kind of the formatting that they have on the player boards. So what such a does is it replaces a phrase, a clearing that follows all the criteria for targeting a clearing previously listed in an action. That's a big, long statement. So if it talks about battle in a clearing with the highest number of warriors of the player with the most amount of victory points, and then it says in such a clearing, which refers to all of that stuff we just said, and then it continues on. It references the clearing. It'll always happen once, and then it uses such a to save time. In the same way that we use pronouns or referencing something rather than giving the full title every time we say it. The next one is pretty simple, but also kind of important. Humans versus bots, the terminology. So there are times when the rules will specifically say for a rule for bot players and human players. They may be different. If any time the rule book says a player, just in general a player, that refers to just any entity in the game. Essentially, anyone who has a player board in front of them, whether they be an artificial intelligence or a meatbag sitting around a table. But if it says a human player, then the bots are no longer in that collective. So player is everybody, humans and bots are separate. And then the last thing, abilities. Every bot has 2 different abilities: poor manual dexterity and hates surprises. So poor manual dexterity means they do not have a hand of cards. They will not gain cards if you need to, say, aid them as a vagabond. They will not give cards if you have abilities that take cards from other people. There is no hand for you to peek at. If any action allows you that opportunity, it is wasted on the bots. There is no hand that they ever have, which means if they would ever gain a card, like you have to give them a card for your action. Instead, you just bump them up by 1 victory point. If you would ever get a card from them for a result of their action or one of your own, you would instead just draw a random card from the deck. So poor manual dexterity, the bots have not so great digits, so they can't hold those cards. So they just decided they don't need one. The only card they ever interact with is the order card, which is never part of their hand. Honestly, for me, I usually draw the order card and I put it right down on the map. I find a spot, depending on what map I'm playing, where it sort of fits nicely, and so I can reference it. I don't even bring it off the board to go anywhere else because I'll forget it there. So, no hands, no cards. Hate surprises. The bots cannot be ambushed. You can have an ambush card, and if there are human players in the game with the bot, you can ambush them, but you can't use them against the bots. And the reason is just the same thing as with the dominance cards. The bots do not have the programming that gives them the wherewithal that ambush cards even exist in this ecosystem. You know, as a human, as a meatbag around the table, you might hold back a bird ambush so that you can respond if someone ambushes your troops. The bots don't have that capability in a couple ways. They don't have hands, and they actually don't really account for the ambush cards. So you can't use them because that would just be mean. Again, if there's humans in the game, you got to look out for them as per usual, but the bots, you can't ambush. So changes to the law, crafting. The bots will only ever craft items. They will never craft the persistent effect. So only the things that have the like scrolls underneath them, never the stone, the gray effects at the bottom. So if you're using the Exiles and Partisans deck, none of those that give them the rules of the different factions, none of those are available to the bots. It's only the actual items that come with the little pieces. Now, they still need those pieces to be available in the supply. If there is no longer a crossbow to be made, the bots cannot make a crossbow. That rule still stands. The other change is they will ignore the victory points on the actual card itself. They will only ever get one. So whether they're making a stick and bindle or a stack of pancakes, it's worth 1 victory point no matter what. And lastly, they never actually need to expend anything or use a building or token or anything to make their items. If they flip over their order card and it has an item on it and it's available in the supply, they put it in their crafted items box and they get a victory point. Simple as that. Now, battling. In battling, warriors always go first. That's true for humans as it is with bots. You need to take care of the warriors before you start touching the cardboard. However, since there isn't a human mind behind the ROOTbot to decide which pieces of cardboard to get rid of first, they have simplified and they say you need to get rid of tokens, the round cardboard, before you take care of any buildings. If there are more than one building, say you get through any tokens there might be there in addition to warriors, and there are 2 or 3 buildings there, find a way to randomize it. So put them all in your hand, shake it up, and draw one out, and that's the one that gets destroyed. All right, dominance cards. The bots cannot interact with dominance. They cannot play it, they cannot see it, they cannot respond to it. Dominance is a part of the game that the bots essentially were not programmed to know about in any shape or form. The last feature of the Law of ROOTbotics I'll point out is this one here, fully cooperative play. So as part of the Clockwork expansion, it is possible for you to play cooperatively, which is not normally a way we can play Root. If you want to do this, you can play with humans or bots You can combine them together, mix and match. Whoever you are playing against, you need to, everybody, if I'm teamed up with my friend and we're going against the mechanical Marquise, we need to both beat the cats to 30 victory points. That is how you win cooperatively. Now, when you're playing, there are a couple things rules that have to be changed. If you have multiple bots, so if the two of us were playing 2 bots on that side of the table, they would not consider each other's pieces enemies. So there's a lot of times again, we take everything very literally in the root rules. If it ever says to, battle an enemy in blah, blah, blah clearing, they would not target each other for obvious reasons. Then it just narrows the choices down to either me or my teammate. We, as humans, are able to still target each other's pieces if we would like. If there's, that's the way I needed to rush to 30, and then a vagabond as my teammate is able to go rogue and just kill a bunch of my pieces and make money off, or make points off of that. Great, we can still do that. But the robots will not target their teammates' things. If you want a leg up on the bots, it says, and if you're feeling adventurous, you can consider that the 2 human or however many humans pieces combine together in terms of ruling a clearing. So if I had 2 cats and my teammate had 2 birds and we were in one clearing together, that would be 4 warriors for our team in terms of how rule is assessed and how the bots might target things and all that. So, because we are teammates, we can use our combined strength to move around the map and rule an area so we can build on it and all of that. So it says, if you do this, if you choose to use this variant within a variant, you'll need to make judgment calls about certain interactions. It says, can a lizard cult convert a friendly eerie warrior using a conspiracy? And it says, there are many such interactions within the game of Root, and we'd encourage you to err on the side of challenge. So if you come across anything weird and you're not really sure how it would go, obviously the rule of cool around the table, if the players all agree on something and they think it's the coolest way to go about it, that works just great. But leader games would encourage you to also consider the challenge aspect. If there's a weird edge case that results in something being a little bit busted, take the pathway that, leaves the players with something a little bit more challenging rather than a huge leg up on the robots. I mean, the robots are just made of cardboard after all. So speaking of the cardboard robots, I'm really excited to be back, to be rebooting this whole series, giving it a fresh coat of paint, bringing the lessons I've learned. Let's just call it what it is. There were mistakes that I made in some of the videos that I'll obviously be incorporating, the correct way of handling it. I think I'm pretty confident in my understanding of the system. However, human speech is a fickle thing, and sometimes words will come out of my mouth wrong. So again, the Klingon subtitles, if there's anything weird, I'll put it in there, but I'll also put it at the top of the description. Hopefully, I won't have any of those episode 1.5s that I'll need to do to totally readdress like a thing that I beefed in the original one, but I'm not going to rule it out either. Anyways, the bots, in closing, are a wonderful addition to the game. I'm not going to totally preempt my review of the Clockwork expansion, which I'll eventually be putting up on my website. Link down below in the description. GivePauseHobby.com is also pretty easy to remember. So I don't want to totally spoil that, but if I'm so interested in the ROOTbots that I'm making this whole teaching series for the second time, I think you probably already know the answer. If it wasn't for these bots, I would not know Root nearly as well as I do. I have been able to introduce it to people with a lower overhead of concern with the cooperative play. I've been able to shore up player counts that would otherwise be a little bit weird. Now, the forthcoming Hirelings expansion is going to add a tremendous amount of option in that regard. But even without that, without the boosting up player counts, I think the ROOTbots are not only a great place to really kick the tires and learn this game that has a lot of rules to learn, but also just a fun thing to play in their own right. Even if you don't have an ulterior motive, like to learn the game better, it's just fun to play against the robots. And I'm not gonna lie, I also think it's fun to just watch the robots do their thing. So much so that I've recorded numerous Robo Rumbles where the bots just do their thing and I just pilot all of them as a uncaring, dispassionate pilot, just letting the robots do what they will. So with that, looking forward to, this was originally, I imagined, as a very short episode, but there's kind of a lot that goes into how these robots work. This is the umbrella rule set that sets up all the ROOTbot factions. So I would actually, now that I've recorded it, imagine that the forthcoming faction videos are actually going to be shorter than this one, for the most part. Some of them are a little bit complicated, but I'll give you a spoiler. The Mechanical Marquise 2.0 is not one of them. So look forward to that, because I know I am. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you took a pause with GivePause Hobby, and we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.